Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Over the past several weeks, waves of severe weather have impacted North Texas, and that's changing the agronomic equation for growers in the region. That's the focus of this week's Agronomy for Your Acres with the experts from Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're talking with Burke Lane. He is a crop consultant based out of Paris, Texas. And Burke, fill us in. What's the crop year been like for growers in Northeast Texas?
Well, it's been pretty rough this year. You know, first off, I always say, well, it can't be any worse than it was last year, and I've just got to quit saying that because 2024 started off pretty rough and has continued to head that way. We had a small window at the end of February to get started. We were fighting borderline soil temperature being a little low, and but some elected to start, and that was pretty much a good thing. From the 1st of March till now, we've just had excessive amounts of rainfall. I mean, if it rained 1 inch, it rained 5 inches. We weren't getting any small amounts of rain, so it was hard to get out there and plant when you knew you had 4 or 5 inches of rain coming. And rainfall wasn't the only weather problems we've had. We've hail events, hail ranging anywhere from pea size to tennis ball size hail.
Oh.
High winds, 70 mile an hour plus winds, and then we've even thrown a couple of tornadoes in there.
Everything, including the kitchen sink down there in North Texas. Burke, so with that being the case, with that much moisture, what are farmers doing in the field now?
Well, right now we've got lay-by on corn. We're B10 to R3, so all the fertility's done. The herbicide applications are done. We're finishing up on some fungicide applications and Afligard. We just wrapped up sorghum and cotton planting. Soybeans are still getting put in the ground. Right now is about our best planting conditions. So we have crops anywhere from just emerging to early stages of reproduction, you know, like R1. And we're trying to get out wheat. Wheat's been ready for a long time. So all the rain, every time it rains, it lowers the test weight. Battling low test weights. The wheat that's still standing good is sprouted, and where the farmers are getting hit pretty good on it. So if you have 4% or more on sprouts, that's a $2 a bushel dock. So they're having some severe dockage there on the wheat that they are taking to town.
That's a big hit. Burke, before we let you go real quick, are you concerned about insect pressure this year in your region?
Yes, it seems like with the rainfall and everything that we've had, it kind of keeps them at bay. And then when the weather starts lining out, insect numbers go to increasing pretty rapidly.
It does.
We looked at some soybeans yesterday. Stink bug pressure's coming up, so it's going to be something to keep an eye on.
It certainly is. Things to watch this year, folks. Keep up to speed and learn more at nutrienagsolutions.com. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFBF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And now it's time to talk markets. Joining us this week is Brian Doherty. He's a senior market advisor with Total Farm Marketing by Stuart Peterson. Brian, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Mike, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Now, this past week, we had the June update to the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates. Brian, June's kind of a snooze fest usually when this report comes out. Were there any surprises on the corn side this month?
No, it was a snooze fest. Yield left unchanged, 181. Everything's unchanged. So attention now quickly turns toward the end of the month when we'll have stocks and acreage report and, of course, weather. Interestingly, the market seemed to find support or relief from the report being out of the way, and buyers seem to take that as an opportunity to kind of add to long positions, trying to bottom pick here as you get in front of more weather, which is probably the big factor as you look ahead for corn, soybeans. The report didn't give us much other than a 5 million metric ton reduction in the winter or in the wheat crop for Russia. There was an expectation of that, so nothing really new there, but weather is going to be the big factor now for the corn crop. We've got a lot of crop that got down to that very end. As of Monday, 5% of the corn crop yet to plant, and there were quite a few fields that were barren and probably not going to get planted. So there's that. Then the acreage report.
So what are you anticipating on this acreage report at the end of the month? Brian, is it still a little too early to have your estimates together for that?
It is. So here's what happened last week. You had 6 days in a row where the National Weather Service 6 to 10 day outlook showed below normal precipitation for most of the western corn belt in areas that have been really wet. And I'm talking a swath in particular, southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, western South Dakota, right through to Wisconsin into the Great Lake region there. And a lot of ground there that was pretty saturated. That forecast came just in time to provide for relief for many farmers to make one last go of it. But then showers again showed up. I think there's going to be some abandonment of acres. Could be 1 to 2% in corn. That starts to make a difference and could have impact on the end of the month report, which already has a pretty snug 90 million acre number for corn.
All right, could get interesting. Brian, let's talk soybeans. I know a lot of folks in the trade were expecting to see big reductions out of South America in their bean production this year. Did USDA provide any big updates?
They did not. They left virtually everything unchanged, which means they're just kicking the can down the road. They want to make sure, I think, that they get their numbers accurate. To maybe the USDA's credit, there were a lot of voices heard late last summer, early fall, that they weren't reducing yield quick enough here in the U.S. And as it turned out, crops were better than expected. And there was some backpedaling even by the USDA in November and then again in the January final yield estimate. So I think they're just being cautious and pragmatically working their way toward actual results rather than speculating too hard on how much to reduce too quickly. There will likely be some reduction, though, yet out of the Southern Hemisphere, and that's a big picture, long-term supportive factor.
All right. Brian, you touched on earlier the changes to the wheat market here in this month's supply and demand estimates report. That wheat market, it has been a tough 2 weeks for producers watching those prices decline. Do we have reason now to think at least a temporary low might be in?
We're working toward that. That's a pretty hard correction on a lot of the wheat charts, and the fund money went strongly long and then went quickly short. Not untypical in a volatile market, in particular wheat, where it's a world crop and you're trying to outguess world numbers. So what the USDA did provide for the marketplace was a confirmation that, look, this crop out of the Black Sea region, Europe, Ukraine, Russia, will be smaller. And again, they took steps. They didn't take a big swipe, but a 5 million metric ton, that's still a pretty big swipe. That's about 5% roughly out of Russia on 1 month. So we think there'll be more, but the market had already anticipated that news, and once it tipped over, not only did farmers selling pick up significantly, but speculators were quick to jump out, and I think speculators were quick to jump on the short side trying to capture some down move. Look for consolidation now as the market refocuses its attention on yield results here at home, and then abroad, look at Russia, probably another reduction coming out of that part of the world.
Lots to watch in these markets as summer moves along. That's Brian Doherty, Senior Market Advisor from Total Farm Marketing by Stuart Peterson. Many Americans are still getting to know the Fendt brand. So Fendt North America built the Fendt Lodge in Jackson, Minnesota, as a place for farmers to get to learn more about Fendt. Mark, I understand you farm about an hour and a half away here from Jackson, Minnesota. Had you ever had a chance to be in Jackson or in the facilities before?
First time.
What'd you think?
I love it. It's great. It's a nice place.
Anything you'd recommend to folks coming by for their first time in the Fendt facility?
The tour is awesome. The way the facility's laid out, it's a really good tour.
Was there anything on the tour that surprised you?
How clean the shop is.
It is incredible, isn't it?
The shop is really clean.
It's almost like you could eat off that floor.
Yeah, you can walk through there. Everyone looks happy. It's well organized and laid out perfect.
Do you feel like you understand the Fendt brand a little bit better after coming here to the facilities?
I think everyone that works here cares a lot about Fendt. It shows in the way it lays out, and I like it. It was well worth the drive.
Fantastic. Brandon, let's talk a little bit about the Fendt Lodge. Why is it here in Minnesota? What's the purpose of this facility?
The purpose of this facility is kind of threefold. So number one, it's about education. So we definitely want to educate about the brand of Fendt and who we are. You get that through the structure itself. Really, that first step is education. The second one is about training. So this is a unique facility where we also get to be able to train customers and dealers on our products. So we haven't done this yet, Mark, but there is outside we got the rest of the equipment not in the showroom, but outside there's a test track around that we can actually drive the machines to be able to get that full experience. And the last one is really just about community. So, being a Fendt owner like yourself, Mark, you come, you learn a little bit more about the chapter books of Fendt. You were discussing earlier, like, I didn't even know Fendt made this tractor. This is pretty cool. Like, where did that come from? An old heritage tractor. We got a 1958 tractor downstairs, the diesel Ross. So you learn about how to be in a different community, and that's something unique in the industry itself, where everybody's one color or another color. We're definitely a new color with red wheels, so we're making an impact. But when you come here, you feel part of a community of other Fendt owners. So, starting with education, training, and building that community of other Fendt owners, that's really the purpose of why we've got this facility here, and we're blessed to have it.
That being said, Brandon, as a farmer, as somebody curious about Fendt, do I need to make an appointment to come to the Fendt Lodge? Do I have to plan ahead in order to set up a visit here?
It helps for sure, especially if you want to take a tour, but we do welcome anybody that wants to come in and visit the showroom and visit the lodge part. This is a family-friendly environment. A lot of times, when you go on something like this, it's okay to go by yourself, but it's a lot funner when you can bring your wife and kids with you too to be able to experience it. So we've got some great things in here for the kids as well. We got buck hunter game, we got some simulators. Down below, they'll be able to actually drive and simulate the real environment before they go drive the machines. But maybe hear from Mark too. I guess you're the one that brought your family.
I brought my wife and kids along, and they loved it. They were shocked at the shop that we need that, Dad, or like automatic welders and benders, and we don't have stuff like that, or jacks like that, or tire moving machines that they got in the shop here. It's like that, they got stuff here that we need, to make their life easier. So I think kids will like it, farm kids especially. So
you can learn more about Fendt or plan your visit to the Fendt Lodge by visiting Fendt.com.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, it was calm last week in the Pacific Northwest. Greg, do you expect that quiet attitude to persist this week?
No, matter of fact, a big pattern shift again. Boy, they've been back in for some weeks, as you pointed out last week, fairly docile this week. Look at this impressive upper air trough, this U-shaped configuration. Quite unusual for this point in mid-June to get this kind of a cool and cold air up aloft. And yeah, the higher peaks above about 8, 9, maybe 10,000 feet, some snow, but certainly some cooler air on the backside of these weather systems. And this is kind of a lockdown position. On the warmer side of it, will rock parts of the plain states down into the Nebraska Panhandle with severe weather. So at the same time, some added drought relief for parts of Montana and the Dakotas, but again, coming at a price with severe weather potential. Very little movement here. The trough is in position. Another low moves right back in across Intermountain West. Another one kicks out into the Canadian Prairie. More warmth in this particular part of the northern plains. Cool air back through Big Sky Country. Higher peak snowfall and no shortage of rainfall as well. With areas along the divide on westward just back into cooler high pressure. Wouldn't be surprised that under clear skies, light winds, some of those Willamette, Rogue River Valley basins and sections and through Idaho have a little whimper of frost on some mornings. Be ready for that. And a cool off is underway across the southwestern sections of the country back into the valleys of California. Fairly heavy irrigation demands. We're tapping into the runoff supply there, which is bountiful coming off the winter season into the Sierra Range. The heat across New Mexico, the worst of the dryness and drought out here. And look at the pattern shift here. While we have heat and humidity, the worst of it south, thunderstorm activity will get areas of the western reaches of Kansas and Oklahoma. Those same areas have made great progress with winter wheat harvest, but again, it's the worst of the ongoing dryness and drought. This is a stagnant upper air pattern across the high plains areas, severe weather. The northern end is some tropical moisture into West Texas cotton, drought relief, but heavy and severe potential there. Pretty quiet weather otherwise in the desert southwest and into the valleys of California.
Any early week severe weather threats as you look into the northern Corn Belt?
Yes, and the western complex as well with this jet stream pattern here. But here, this is the complicating factor here. It's high pressure at the surface, but stacked up way up aloft. You know, in the engine shop, you take a gas and you compress it, you heat it up. Same with the atmosphere. So while this is not in a very typical setup for highs, this is sinking air and readings into the mid, maybe upper 90s and readings up to 105 in the heat index value. So that's the problem with corn and soybeans in some of these fields that are going to dry out quickly. Dryness and drought beginning to show up already in parts of the eastern sections. Look at the severe weather potential across the plains and the western Corn Belt locales. Little change. Storm clusters, big towering clouds, and heavy and severe in these particular areas. And meanwhile, you get into the eastern Corn Belt, maybe we'll bust the cap with a thunderstorm, but otherwise, that weather pattern is just hot and humid and tough on man and beast. Here's the southern end of the jet across the southern plains. Some drought relief of late into areas of the southern plains, but again, severe weather potential. Here's the core of the heat, and looky here, a tropical system coming into areas of Texas. Rains pick up across the Gulf Coast, flooding potential into the Rio Grande and parts of West Texas, cotton on southward. Busy weather pattern and a pattern shift in that part of the country.
Greg, this heat bump that's over the eastern part of the U.S. right now, how long is this going to last?
Probably for the next 10 days, 2 weeks. Matter of fact, we'll cover it here on the longer range as we get into the eastern part of the country here. It's high pressure, but again, here is this hot high right here. A lot of stacked up upper level pressure pushing on down to the atmosphere, and that's how you get this compressional warming. Now, if we can weaken the cap, we'll bust a thunderstorm in some parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but mainly it's severe weather potential out here across much of the western Corn Belt at times with dry weather as well. A lot of crop stress anticipated, by the way, in the next couple of weeks with those shallow root systems and rapid drying. We've got some dry areas as well into parts of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. Severe weather potential here with storm clusters. Will you maybe pop a thunderstorm in the eastern Corn Belt? Otherwise, mid and upper 90s expected, and real tough on man and beast with outdoor work conditions. Pretty quiet weather pattern across the southeastern and eastern parts of the country. Severe weather through Florida, quiet through the Delta, showers and thunderstorms picking up across areas of Texas. And looky here, it's a busy tropical pattern with flooding rainfall into parts of Texas later in the week.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. The growing season is underway for farmers across this country, and the political season is in effect in Washington, D.C. Those two things intersect when it comes to the Farm Bill. Joining us now to talk about things on the ground and in D.C. is Cam Quarles. He serves as the CEO of the National Potato Council. Cam, thanks for talking with us this week.
Mike, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
What are you hearing from growers out in the countryside? Planting season go okay for potato farmers?
Yeah, we're obviously right in the middle of our season. A little bit bigger crop, I think, than we've had in the past few years. Creates its own set of challenges. I don't think that's unique to potatoes. I think a number of commodities are seeing that. The industry is going to work through that on kind of an individual operation basis, and we're looking forward to harvest coming up. It's amazing, but it's not that far away.
It's not. These things just keep moving, and with harvest on the horizon, so's the election, Cam. So this brings politics into focus. We do finally have some text from the House Ag Committee on the Farm Bill. You're, of course, part of the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance. What was the consensus after reading the text?
The House Ag Committee did a terrific job reflecting a lot of the recommendations that the specialty crop industry, the fruit, vegetable, nut industry in the U.S. spent over 2.5 years putting these recommendations together. And the Chairman Thompson, all of the folks on the staff there took those to heart and really reflected those very important competitive priorities for the specialty crop industry. There's obviously a lot of political challenges to get that to the president's desk, but the this is the first step in a long process, and it was a good step. It moved the process forward.
Of the proposals that we saw from the first text, Cam, which ones does the specialty crop industry really want to see cross that finish line?
Yeah, so for our industry, we really don't play in the traditional kind of program crop support areas. So we're looking at a lot of other stuff. Trade, incredibly important. Research. The specialty crop industry is going to live and die by the investments that are made in partnership with the federal government in research that's 5, 10, 20 years out into the future. Pest and disease programs that either seek to eradicate threats that are already here, or better yet, keep them out of the country. And then there is a fantastic program called the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. It allows every state and territory of the U.S. to promote specialty crops in their own unique ways. So the folks in Maine, for example, will have different priorities than the folks in Hawaii, and every state in between allows them all to tailor it a little bit and really make their own individual specialty crop industries that much more competitive.
All right, so we'll be watching those issues as Farm Bill discussions move forward. Cam, on the potato front specifically, you mentioned trade issues. It is hugely important to your industry. What are the issues that are causing you some concern right now on the trade front?
We have opened up Mexico to fresh table stock potatoes. That was one of the longest disputes in USDA history. We finally got that market open a couple of years ago. It is growing. It is the consumer acceptance by the Mexican consumers of U.S. fresh potatoes is tremendous. We're seeing those volumes growing. However, our competition in Mexico certainly hasn't gone away. They recognize that they would like to constrain our access, and we need to remain vigilant in keeping that really, really important market of Mexico open. Second one, Mike, and you and I have talked about this one as well. It's a forward-looking market. Japan is already one of the largest export markets for processed potato products. We would like to do a similar thing in Japan that we've done in Mexico. Again, you have a very politically connected domestic industry in Japan. They like the monopoly that they have on their market right now. They don't want to give that up, and we're going to need all of the strength of USDA, USTR, the White House to push past a lot of that protectionism.
All right, lots to watch there on the global scene. Domestically, Cam, I'm hearing a conversation happening in Washington, D.C. that it sounds as though potatoes, per USDA, could be reclassified from a vegetable to a grain. Is that true, and what's the likelihood of that happening?
Yeah, so this all kicked off, you're right, Mike. This conversation has been going on for a number of years now, and it really got a lot of momentum as the dietary guidelines for Americans process started up. Again, this happens every 5 years. Federal government, USDA, and the Health and Human Services sit down and they try to devise what they feel is the best advice for American consumers about what their diets should look like every day. One of the first things they ask in this round is whether or not potatoes should be considered interchangeable with grains. Obviously, we have nothing against grains. We love our folks over on that side of the world, but potatoes, botanically, horticulturally, scientifically, are a vegetable. They have nutrients that grains don't have, and it confuses consumers. It's kind of it's a strange place for us to be having this conversation. We are very interested in, we push back very hard on that. We want to make sure that the dietary guidelines process discards that notion. It would have ripple effects across a number of federal programs, from school children all the way to potato farms around the United States.
Thanks, Cam, and we'll have to come back to that story and pick it up before that October 1st deadline. That's Cam Quarles, CEO of the National Potato Council. Folks, leave it here. When we come back, we'll talk federal policy as it impacts sustainable aviation fuel. We'll have that next on This Week in Agribusiness.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Clean energy is a hot topic in America, and it's impacting the world of agriculture as more folks switch to renewable fuels. Clean Fuels Alliance America is the trade association for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel, and they've been looking at the impact of low-carbon fuel standards. Jeff Earl serves as the Director of State Government Affairs for the association, and he joins us today. Jeff, let's talk a little bit about low-carbon fuel standards. First and foremost, what are they and what do they do?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me today. So low carbon fuel standards are a market-based approach for removing greenhouse gas emissions in the state's transportation industry. And so the way they work is you have a carbon intensity standard. A fuel that has a higher CI standard creates deficits. A fuel like biodiesel or renewable diesel that has a lower CI carbon intensity score creates credits. And so the way it works is that after a compliance period, usually the petroleum refiners or other obligated parties have to match up those deficits with credits. And so they are able to purchase these credits on a market, a clean energy market, and they are able to apply those to their deficits. And then that way they can be using renewable fuels to help drive down the GHG emissions in their state.
All right, and we've seen these in the real world, Jeff. I know California has had a low carbon fuel standard for some time. Do you consider that one a success or a model to follow?
Yes, definitely. It's not without, maybe some, headaches and some hurdles, but we have found great success in California. Our industry has, as we always talk about, that the heavy duty industry, the industry that we really play in is going to be that hard to electrify sector. And so by using fuels like biodiesel or renewable diesel in your heavy duty transportation industry, it is going to be the best, cheapest option in meeting those decarbonization goals. And so California has been a great success for us. Currently, right now, over 60% of the fuel in California's diesel pool is either biodiesel or renewable diesel. So this is a 60% displacement of petroleum diesel fuel in a huge, huge transportation market.
And I know that California is not the only one looking at these policies. Jeff, why are other states looking at these as well?
So I think they've seen success in states like California and Oregon and others. And so I think they are seeing that this is a reasonable approach to addressing decarbonization. I think the great thing about a LCFS policy is that also it can be worked and complement other environmental policies. So the LCFS is more of a carrot, as far as a policy is concerned. So it's encouraging, it's incentivizing innovation in clean energy technologies. While that also can, complement other policies that maybe have more strict standards and things of that nature. So I think they're seeing these as a complement policy tool, and they've seen the success that it's had on the West Coast. Is why I think a lot of states are exploring clean fuel standards for their own.
Lots to watch as this summer's policy comes into focus. That was Jeff Earl, the Director of State Government Affairs with Clean Fuels Alliance America. You can learn more at cleanfuels.org.
Greg Solier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Yes, there are some precipitation chances next week. Greg Solier joins us, and who's going to see what and when? Greg?
You know, this time of the year, these thunderstorms can bring down all or nothing. 10 drops of rain or 10 inches of rain in some cases. Not going to see that. Well, maybe we might actually across areas of the Gulf Coast with time, but you can see with time the western Corn Belt areas back into the plains, heavy and severe, with maybe some totals pushing 2 inches where you get those storms to recur and repeat. Hail and high wind as well. So moisture in the Pacific Northwest, pretty good for the time of year. Welcome to summertime, by the way, in the 20th, up and down the eastern seaboard. If we can get something going late in the week, we may pop the cap, the lid on the atmosphere, and get a couple of thunderstorms into the eastern Corn Belt. But look at the range of rain, Gulf Coast, including Florida, back all the way to Texas, and probably even past in the areas of Rio Grande Valley locales with the worst of the dryness and drought, plus tropical moisture. Mike, that means flood potential in that particular part of the country. The tropics are getting active in the Gulf.
Let's take a look at that last week of June. Greg, what did the temperatures look like?
Going to be chasing this hot ridge all all summertime season around here. It's El Nino still really high overdrive and really an El Nino that's quickly transitioning to La Nina this time of the year. This is what you get. Probably lots of mid, maybe sub upper 90s to near 100. Crop stress, yes. Stress on man and beast, yeah. All the way back across the areas of the divide. Readings a little bit below average across the northwestern part of the country, where it's, again, with this coming week, we'll have moisture, more moisture to follow. Look at the plume of tropical moisture and daytime heating on the edge of this jet stream to get some heavy and severe storm clusters over the high plains areas. Look at the expanse of moisture in the Gulf Coast, the southeast, but not much going on across much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt into the northeast of New England.
As we get into the first week of July, Greg, is it going to be a hot Independence Day for us?
We get some retrogression, back and forth movement of the hot ridge. We'll get readings still above average, but an easing of the heat, we'll put it that way. Any cool air lobe through the northeast of New England. Here's the core of the heat, western Corn Belt back into the plains across the southwestern reaches of the country. Meanwhile, look at the tropical moisture and systems here and here. So more rain, a little movement of moisture across the worst drought areas of the southern plains. Not much in the way of a monsoon setup over the southwestern part of the country. Good news with moisture into the Pacific Northwest, increasing dryness and drought for much of the northern and eastern Corn Belts.
As you get to the middle of July, week of July 8th, Greg, does that heat start to moderate?
Not really. It's going to be with us here. I think it's something we just basically deal with. Here we go with the hot ridge over the middle part of the country to about the Appalachians, record setting maybe in some areas, crop stress as well. Look at the warmth over the western part of the country. Moisture, you ask? Southern plains, southeastern states, dry across the Corn Belt, some moisture in 2 areas of the Pacific Northwest. Be ready for heat and drought this year.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of heavy-duty grain carts and make the most of your harvest season. Visit brandt.ca for more. This week, we're talking about how farmers are connected with Andy Castillo. He's the farm machinery and equipment editor with Farm Progress. And Andy, you recently wrote a great piece on the impact of those GPS outages back in March. Fill us in. How does GPS work?
To condense an extremely complicated technological process into 30 seconds. So precision guidance is triangulated by constellations of satellites that orbit the Earth and terrestrial base stations, and they can get down to centimeter level location data. And what happened during the most recent solar storm on May 10th was plasma ejections came from the sun and disrupted the ionosphere in the Earth. And when that happened, basically the signal that was coming from the satellites down to the machines was skewed. So the location data was inaccurate, which really impacted a lot of farms.
Gotcha. It sounds like the plasma was bending the rays of the information coming to and from the satellite, leading to missed readings. And Andy, then, what was the impact of that for the industry, did you find?
Well, the impact was that a lot of machines shut down at the end of rows, or they pushed on and they either turned off their GPS guidance or just lived with the inaccuracies.
All right, and that I imagine is going to have a financial consequence for some growers.
You know, the financial consequence is going to be felt for years to come. You know, at first glance, maybe this doesn't look like a big deal, but I talked with an economist, Terry Griffin. He's from Kansas State University, and he estimated that when all is said and done, this could be about $500 million worth of lost potential revenue for American farmers, which is quite substantial.
It is. That is real money. And Andy, what can farmers do to prepare in case one of these things happens again?
Well, because these machines rely on satellites, the best thing they can do is research and find equipment that can connect to multiple different constellations. So maybe if one signal is being skewed, it can compare and use another signal. And then they can also track these solar storms on NOAA. NOAA has a really great website, and they can sign up for notifications that let them know if there's a storm that would impact their machines.
That'd be great. Be aware of the situation. Weather isn't just terrestrial anymore. We've got to be concerned about space weather now as well. Andy, if we've got folks who want to read your story in detail, get more information, where would you send them to do that?
They can go on farmprogress.com and click on the technology tab. And one thing, just as a final thought, that I think this event really highlighted is just the reliance on machines that we have. It's really quite a driving force in machinery today.
It is. We need it. Work and keep track of what's happening up in space. Andy Castillo, technology editor with Farm Progress. Thanks for joining us.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. The tractors that Dad had are in the spotlight this Father's Day weekend. The Shed brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, you shared with us many photographs of Dad's tractors, and it was great to see them, and it reminded us of the strong connection with fathers on the farm and the tractors they had. I wanted to share with you, though, just three. This one from Minnesota, Casson, Minnesota, is owned by Tim Ness. His father, Sterling Ness, had that tractor. Sterling passed away 6 years ago after farming a lot of acreage of corn and beans, 2,000 acres of corn and beans that he ran, and cattle and hogs there. And he loved to get out and plow with his neighbors with his John Deere tractors. Here's a John Deere B at Albany, Minnesota. Ryan Pratt has his dad's tractor. Leslie Pratt bought this tractor new in 1951. He's been gone about 20 years now, Ryan shared with me. And a 1949 Farmall H owned by Glenn Gepner of Jasper, Indiana, was purchased new by his grandmother. Yeah, Fidelia Gepner bought it new in 1949, and Glenn's dad, Emil, used that tractor to farm, and it was parked in a barn then in 2010 after Emil Gepner passed away. And Glenn says, if you open up the toolbox still on that tractor, as you can see, there are gloves in it, and he says you can still smell the aroma of the chewing tobacco that Emil Gepner chewed. Well, thanks for sharing the stories with us here in the tract. Oh yeah, maybe you noticed. I have a toolbox back here. This was on Dad's tractor before it was restored. I've kept it all of this time. Haven't really looked down in there. Maybe one of these weeks we'll do the Al Capone Vault episode and we'll look down in there to see what's in Dad's toolbox. It's the big hour of the week for Mark Stock. He gives us the report of what's happening at Big Iron.
Well, hello, Max, and happy Father's Day weekend to you. Also, happy Father's Day to all of the dads out there, all the granddads, all the godfathers. We hope you enjoy your special day. Now, on Monday, Max, we've got their first of 2 days, big auctions in Hamilton, Illinois. It's the Dealer and Farmer Auction. Day one features a lot of late model ag equipment, tractors, and combines. Equipment selling from Tractor Central, AHW LLC, Greenmark Equipment, Central Illinois Ag, Butler Machinery Company. And then day two features a lot of trucks and construction equipment. So these online auctions will start to close at 8:30 in the morning Central Time, June 17th and June 18th. On June the 19th, Leroy and Loretta Cook will be having their auction by Bertrand, Nebraska, selling a John Deere 780 combine. Check out their John Deere 3420 telehandler. And Max, on June the 20th, 335 acres of Meade County, South Dakota land will sell in 6 tracks. And Max, on Friday, June the 21st, Van Wall Equipment will sell late model John Deere equipment. 2022 John Deere 780 combine, 2022 412R self-propelled sprayer, a John Deere 9620 RX quad track tractor, and many more items. All of the equipment, all of the land will be sold to the highest bidder online on bigiron.com.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. Now it's time to meet one of the state leaders of FFA. Joining us this week is Colin Bauer. He's serving as the president of the Iowa State FFA. And Colin, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about you. Colin, did you grow up in an agricultural family?
I did. I grew up on a family farm in southern Audubon County. There we raise right around 300 cows for a cow-calf operation. And we have just under 3,000 acres for row crop, your typical corn and soybeans type of situation there. So I grew up immersed in agriculture, to say the least.
And at some point you decided FFA was going to be a good fit. Colin, what was it that made you want to be a part of that program?
Right. So I actually grew up from a chapter where right around 75% of our student body was involved. So I knew that that was a place I was going to be once I came of age. But when I was in 8th grade, My advisor, Brittany Almquist, told me to do the Ag Impact CDE with a few of my classmates. And from that point on, I knew working with the team, doing those public speaking type of events was something I was going to love to do.
That's fantastic. And of course, you were recently elected back at the April convention to be the next president of the Iowa FFA. Colin, what are you excited about over your next year?
You know, you probably hear this answer a lot if you ask this question to people in positions like mine, but I cannot be more excited to talk to these members. I'll be traveling across the state, and they say state officers put around 18,000 miles on their vehicles. So traveling across the state and talking to those members is something I'm really, really excited about.
That is fantastic. You'll have plenty of time to do it, Colin. We appreciate you taking the time to fill us in and wish you the best of luck in this next year.
You bet. Thank you.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. More and more, these phones and these cameras are capable of doing things that are hard to believe. This week, Chad Colby has an update as to what they can do in the field.
These are my favorite type of tech segments. It's the type where I show some technology that's truly disruptive, but it's also extremely practical. I talked to a local precision planting dealer, and he was telling me about a beta app that their dealers are using right now called Smart Scout. And if you're familiar with precision planting, they've always shared a lot of tools over the years to help you go out and check on your emergence in your conditions, regardless of the crop that you planted. And I think that's always been a great tool. You may have heard of the pogo stick in the past. Well, now with Smart Scout, it essentially uses machine vision, so the camera system on your phone, and augmented reality to kind of automatically assess emergence in your field in kind of a 3D space. So as I click on each plant and basically rate each plant, it will also then, when it completes the run, give you a full report of what the data provided you. Certainly it's going to give you all those basics, right? In really quick time too. I think that's important. It's going to give you population. It's going to show you spacing between the plants. It's going to show you the location in the field. And it also is going to show you some economic impacts of that emergence test that you did. Now, there's a lot of other features to this. You can also put in photos of the location, but I can't think about how handy this is going to be in the future. When you can go out, you can check this really quick, you can get that data collected, and you can take it all the way to yield. So you can start to learn what things were happening in your field, and you can quantify those things because you'll have the location information and all the data that goes with it. What a fantastic tool. Talk to your precision planting dealer. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thanks, Chad. It is fantastic to see machinery taking over some of those hard calculations like figuring yield in a growing field. We appreciate that update. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Folks, firearms are very common out in rural America, but deaths have been rising across the country. And it's time to take a look at firearm safety, particularly in rural areas. Joining us this week to do that is Dr. Charles Jennison. He's a doctor at the University of Iowa Department of Emergency Medicine. And doctor, this is an issue you've been studying for a while. Why now should we be extra concerned about rural gun protection?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that we certainly have continued to see an increasing number of firearm-related deaths. And for adolescents and children, it's become the #1 killer of children in our country. Starting in 2020, that firearm-related deaths surpassed that of motor vehicle collisions. And so if we really want to do something about decreasing the number of young people dying, we need to do something about firearm-related deaths.
Absolutely. When I think about accidental deaths, of course, with firearms, that makes sense. But I'm also wondering suicides in rural areas. Dr. Jennison, is that a concern of yours as well?
Oh, very much so. I think it'd be surprising to a lot of rural residents to know that the rate of suicides is the highest in rural areas. The less densely populated an area is in the United States, the higher the suicide rate. And I think that would be kind of surprising to a lot of people. It's been that way for decades. and the rates are actually kind of increasing in rural areas compared to other areas. So this is something that's kind of an area that's getting worse, and really something that we need to do something about. And especially true also for adolescents. We know that firearm ownership is higher in rural areas, and the rate of firearm-related suicides in rural areas is about twice that in more urban areas. And a lot of it has to do with having access to a lethal means of killing ourselves, which a firearm is.
It is, and so we've got to make sure that lethal means is only used when it's needed to. Dr. Jennison, what do you recommend for folks to keep these guns or weapons secure?
Well, certainly securing these firearms safely is an important thing, and really the safest way to store them is locked and unloaded. And with the ammunition stored locked separately. That's really the safest way to store them. Certainly some families that might not be work for them to do it in that way. Many people who have firearms for protection say that that's not something that's reasonable for them. But even if you have firearms for protection, there are good ways now to store them to get quick access, so that if you even want them loaded, at least they're locked away and they're not access of other people can't get to it, especially children.
Absolutely.
And that's where a lot of these unintentional deaths occur in families, is that young people get hold of them and then shoot the firearm and hurt themselves or someone else in the family.
Lots to think about, Dr. Jennison. Thank you for that update, and thank you to Grinnell Mutual for sponsoring this segment. Folks, thanks for joining us this week. Be sure to catch us next time for more This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.